notable transactions. I feel like you can circle with a Sharpie in big, bold print as much as you can the losses. Davante Adams, a lot of focus on his move to Vegas, now a member of the Raiders. Marquez Valdes-Scantling trying to fill that void of Tyreek Hill, that now he is no longer a member of this Packers, and this is going to be really difficult to replace some of this production. Matt LaFleur, he knows that.
Sometimes you got to make some tough decisions. Certainly appreciate everything Davante brought to our team. I mean, he's the best receiver in the National Football League. So that was a tough one for me personally and for our organization. Tay and I have a great relationship. I think there's a great mutual respect. Certainly he's a guy that's going to be tough to replace, and so you never want to let great players like that walk away from your team. But like I said, it's one of those deals where it's some tough decisions have to be made, and unfortunately in the National Football League there is a thing called the salary cap, and you got to get below that as well, and so everything factored into those decisions.
Spend some dollars on that quarterback that I hear is pretty good. Mark Ross, Lance Erline with us right now. Mark, all right, give me this from a front office perspective. What do you do if you're the Green Bay Packers? Because we highlighted some of those losses. You know you got your quarterback in the fold. What's the plan of attack?
Well, as LaFleur said there, you have to make tough decisions with the salary cap. And we know all along that Aaron Rodgers was the main focus. He was the guy, and you knew that, okay, possibly get Davante Adams back. But then once that ship sailed, and you invested all the money in Aaron Rodgers, okay, we have tough decisions to make elsewhere. So you lose Davante Adams, you lose MVS. You're basically your starting receivers are now. It's obvious. Let's not overcomplicate this. You have to replace those guys. The last we saw the Packers offense in the NFC Championship game there, they struggled. Now you don't have your two biggest playmakers in the receiver position. Davante Adams, who I think is the best receiver in the game. Okay, now we have to replace those guys. You know, you missed out kind of on the free agent market. There are some guys kind of hanging out there. Obviously, no one to that level of Davante Adams, but still possibly a veteran. But also, when you look at the draft market here, very strong group of receivers. I think you get in the first round. So, Mike, I know Lance will talk more about that. But if I'm the Packers, I'm looking at it. Okay, let's get a vet or two in there at a decent price. But then also, hey, let's get one of these playmaking receivers in the draft, because it seems like it's a ready-made group to go there, Lance.
Yeah, it really does. And, you know, I think one of the things you have to keep in mind is let's remember who Green Bay gets back. We see who they lost. What you didn't see in the additions column there was David Bakhtiari, who missed last year because of a torn ACL. Robert Tonyan, the tight end, who I think is a very talented pass catcher, who Aaron Rodgers really loves throwing to, and he comes back off of a torn ACL as well. So you get a couple guys back on your roster that are going to be very, very important. And let's face it, roster building is a fluid situation. Roster building and roster repairing is always going to be fluid. And so Green Bay, I think, is going to have to maybe lean on the running game a little bit more. And this is where, you know, the draft picks that you've had in terms of creating a rush attack and being strong at the running back position, I think maybe that's going to pay off a little more this year as Green Bay finds their way.
All right, Lance, I'm glad you bring up some of the pieces that were hurt last year. And you're right, this roster, that will help them. But they do have some picks here in this draft. And we keep talking about this, having this conversation about wide receivers. Is there a player or two that this team should be targeting to help fill that void where we talk about MVS not being there, not to mention that Davante Adams guy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when you look at the Packers' needs, they have a need at inside linebacker. They have a need, I think, at tackle, where at some point you're really going to have to address that position. David Bakhtiari's contract goes way, way up next year. But wide receiver is the initial position that we're going to talk about. And I think one of the guys that really stands out to me is Jameson Williams, wide receiver from Alabama. But ironically enough, this is a guy coming off of a torn ACL. It's something we just talked about with two other players. He's got a torn ACL as well. He may make it back for a portion of the season after being on the PUP list early on, but he's not an immediate help. But you know what? Green Bay they have not over the last 2 or 3 years drafted for immediacy. They have drafted for building a team that they believe can win long term. And I think Jameson Williams is one of those guys. Now, Treylon Burks is another player who I think has a lot of talent and could step in and help right away. And so could Chris Olave if he's there. The problem with Burks and Olave is you just don't know if they're going to get to the Green Bay Packers first-round pick at number 23. But with 2 first-round picks, with 2 second-round picks, and with a third-round pick that is inside, all of them inside the top 100, you have enough ammunition if you want to move up the draft board and go get Drake London. Go get your hands on Garrett Wilson if you choose to. So the Packers can be very aggressive in this draft. I'm going to throw a name at you in the second round because this feels like a Green Bay pick. Christian Watson from North Dakota State. He was fantastic at the Senior Bowl, had a great combine, and really is the type of big vertical wide receiver that I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling was for the Packers, only I think he's more skilled, Christian Watson, coming out of college. So that's the name to keep on the radars in the second round for the Packers.
Yeah, if they're able to go get a guy like Drake London, every time there's one of those 50-50 balls, it feels like 80-20 from that kid out of USC. You did mention Chris Olave, by the way, if you're into the next-gen stats and some of those draft profiles, pretty similar to Lee Evans, just another name that you can throw out into the mix. Lance, I know you continue to monitor this, and Mark, I know you're keeping busy as we creep a little bit closer to the draft. Good stuff from both of you. All right, speaking of that wide receiver conversation, the reason why we're having it from a Green Bay perspective is the loss of this guy. Yeah, really, really talented, arguably the best wide receiver in the game, Davante Adams, getting to play with his former college quarterback and Derek Carr. The two of those guys already have that built-in chemistry, which leads to that big question. How good is this team? How good can they be this offseason with some moves still to be made? Jeff Jadia, not to mention James Palmer's with us. Jeff, I will start with you. Wide receiver-wise, in that room, do the Raiders have the best room in the NFL?
Oh, I think they do. And I think you add Darren Waller to that mix, and you got the best receiving core in the AFC West, especially when you take away Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs. You talked about Davante Adams. He talked about this in his opening press conference with the franchise, talked about just being with Hunter Renfrow and the things he could learn from a slot receiver like that. You talk about Darren Waller, the second best tight end in the game behind Travis Kelce. But the key here is Josh McDaniels, because talking to a former DB coach in the AFC East, he talked about just the way McDaniels can scheme guys up, what he did with those slot receivers like Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and the big tight end like Rob Gronkowski in New England, the route combinations he designed. He is a master at getting guys open, making it easy for the quarterback. And James, people talk about Derek Carr being the 4th best quarterback in his division. With that group, he's going to have games where he outplays the Patrick Mahomes and the Justin Herberts of the world.
He really is, Jeff. And, you look at where you're sitting in Kansas City and you see what they used to have in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, 2 players that we were told repeatedly by Patrick Mahomes that had to be double-teamed, almost each of them, in every single game. That's kind of what the Raiders have. Davante Adams is double-teamed constantly. I've done a number of Raiders games where they told me when Darren Waller's on the field, he is always drawing extra attention that opens things up for everybody else. Something the Chiefs have never had is exactly what Jeff's talking about, that third option in a skilled slot player like Hunter Renfrow. That third option they have had over 100 catches last year, over 1,000 yards receiving last season, and 9 touchdowns. And I had a long conversation with Hunter Renfrow last season, and he talked about the chemistry that he has with Derek Carr, how they play basketball and Xbox and already know what each other are thinking at all times. Well, he has that with Davante Adams as well. So the chemistry aspect that Josh McDaniels is walking into and how his quarterback knows his top 2 receivers so well in terms of chemistry. Carr has said it openly over and over again that he has spent more time with Hunter Renfrow than he has any receiver in his life. And then he also has that with Davante Adams. And then you throw in Darren Waller. It might be, in terms of familiarity, in terms of chemistry, it's probably the best group that we're seeing between quarterback and pass catchers in the division.
Yeah, I keep thinking about all that talent that has gone to that division. We always focus in, James, you know this, on the offensive guys, but can you imagine some of these defenses trying to keep in check an offense like that? And by the way, for what it's worth, it's been about 20 years since I graduated college. You mentioned that chemistry. Something tells me Carr and Adams still have that. I know I still do with my old college roommates, but from a Kansas City perspective, James, break this down for me, because Tyreek Hill is such a huge piece to that team's offense, what he can do with his speed. How different is this offense for KC going to look without him?
Ronald Jones, who's another one of these new skill position players coming in at the running back spot from Tampa Bay, maybe said it best. There's guys everywhere. There's talent everywhere, and it's going to be spread around. That's a different thought process than what we've seen in Kansas City over the last several years. Every day in practice, it has been a constant work on how do we find different ways to get Tyreek Hill the ball,